say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Let us pray. God our Father, as we celebrate the 236th birthday of our great army, we turn to you in gratitude and in hope. We are truly grateful for our great army, the strength of our nation. We thank you for our nation, its riches, our army, and of course, our greatest assets, our soldiers and their families, the strength of our army. We thank you for their dedication, those who have served and those that continue to serve to make our nation great. We thank you for our many friends at home and abroad who have stood by our great army in times of war and in times of peace. We thank you for your guidance and power over all of us, and ask that we as a nation and as an army continue to share these blessings you have showered upon us for many years to come. We ask that we may be instruments of hope and of peace in the world that is so troubled, and that our days will be blessed, that as we as an army will celebrate many more birthdays for many years to come. This we come before you this day and pray in your holy name. Amen.
Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, the 37th Chief of Staff of the Army, General Martin E. Dempsey.
Thanks very much. I'm honored to be the first speaker today, and especially honored to be the 37th Chief on this occasion of our 236th birthday. As I remind people, for the record, I was not around for the first 199 of those. Secretary Shinseki, great to see you. DepSec Def. General Sullivan, thanks for being here. All the other distinguished guests, Secretary of Defense, Secretary McHugh, Sergeant Major of the Army, our ladies, thanks, and all of you, thanks for being here to help us celebrate the Army's 236th birthday. Yesterday, I got to spend some time with wounded warriors and at the rollout and inauguration of the collaboration between the Army Homefront Fund and Operation Homefront, which is a great collaboration of organizations intended to help soldiers make the transition from active component life into retirement and in that transition. And so it was a great day. This morning I went and started the day with the Secretary of the Army and senior leaders of the Army in Arlington National Cemetery. And we laid a wreath at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And that's one of those moments that should remind us all why we do what we do. And then the other thing that came to mind today is that in thinking back on our history, the Army was formed 236 years ago. That's 1 year before the Congress of the United States actually signed and approved the Declaration of Independence, and 2 years before the Congress of the United States approved the Stars and Stripes as our national emblem. So think about that. A year before the Declaration of Independence, the people of the United States laid their trust and put themselves, their future, their families, and their very freedoms in the hands of the United States Army. That's who we are. That's who we must be. That's who we will be. And so the only other thing I would tell you today is I want to steal a bit of a quotation from one of my predecessors as Chief of Staff of the Army, General Douglas MacArthur, who in speaking at West Point in the early 60s said this, but again, I am paraphrasing. "You are the leaven which binds together the entire fabric of our national system of defense. From your ranks come the great leaders who hold the nation's destiny in their hands at the moment when the war drums sound. The Army has never failed us. Were you to do so, a million ghosts in olive drab, in brown khaki, in blue and gray, in sand and in woodland camouflage would rise from their white crosses, thundering those magic words, duty, honor, and country. I'm proud of each and every one of you. Thank you for what you do for our Army and our nation every day. God bless America." And I almost ran off the stage at my great peril as the 37th Chief of Staff before I introduced my boss, the Secretary of the Army. As I described him on Saturday, a great patriot, a great leader, and a champion of soldiers and their families. Ladies and gentlemen, Secretary John McHugh.
Thank you very much, Chief. Thank you and welcome to each and every one of you. Secretary Shinseki, Secretary Lynn, Secretary Westfall. We're joined by a veritable array of luminaries from the Department of Defense as well as Department of the Army, a number of Assistant Secretaries of the Army. Thank you all so much for being here, for providing a sense of dignity to this very happy celebration. And each and every one of you for being here. You are critically important to us, but I want to pay a special tip of the hat to our guests today, the wounded warriors and the residents of the Soldiers and Airmen's Home who have joined with us, whose lives and every step they take, every breath they take are the embodiment of the spirit of the sacrifice that has brought us through these 236 years as a great American Army. So let's give them a particular warm welcome. This is just my second Army birthday as Secretary, but I'm starting to feel like the old-timer. I know I look like the old-timer, but I'm starting to feel that way as well. Because in my relatively short time here in the Pentagon, we've already welcomed one new chief, one new sergeant major. We're preparing, in my judgment, sadly, to say goodbye to a retiring Secretary of Defense. And with no presumption, but should the Senate in its wisdom confirm General Dempsey and General Odierno, we'll still soon have a new Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and we'll have a new Chief of Staff of the Army. My third, and I'm beginning to wonder if what the Army's had more of, birthdays or chiefs of staff, but I think clearly the President's comments summed up all of this churn very, very well when he announced his new national security team. He said, and I quote, "The men and women of our armed forces are the best our nation has to offer, and they deserve nothing but the absolute best in return." So I wish all of those new nominees and those in the wings on the new national security team the best of luck. May your confirmation be quicker than my own, and we're looking forward to working with you. So this is a good day by any measure, but I think it is most of all, as the Chief mentioned, we cut our first cake on Saturday evening. This will be our second. We'll cut a third this evening on Capitol Hill. This Army Birthday Week is a veritable bacchanalia of confectionery sugar. And it's probably why we wisely end the birthday festivities with the Army Staff Run to work it all off. But it is fitting we take this time to celebrate. But I think it's fitting as well that we remember not only how special this one occasion is, but rather how it should be a celebration of our proud history, the history of this great Army. And it should serve, too, as a reminder of the 1.1 million men and women who wear that proud uniform, who are today serving in not one but two theaters of war, who are deployed in some 80 countries worldwide, defending the lives of others, defending our way of life, and protecting our homeland. And I've really been reminded of that myself personally just in the last few weeks, because a few weeks ago I had the opportunity, as the Secretary of Defense did recently as well, to visit a small combat outpost in the Arghandab River Valley. And I was honored to pin combat action badges and combat infantryman badges on nearly a dozen soldiers. They'd seen fierce combat. They had sustained losses. But in that process, they had worked day after day, chipping away at challenges faced by the Afghan people and separating those people from what we all want: freedom, liberty, the opportunity to make our own choices. And as they did it, those American soldiers made small gains, but over days and days made a big difference, like when they opened a school for girls. Not long after that, I traveled to the flood-ravaged regions of Mississippi and Louisiana, where the Army Corps of Engineers have been working alongside state and local officials, not just to save lives, but to save villages, towns, to save cities, making a difference. And just last week, I traveled very south in the 7,000 islands that make up the Philippine archipelago to Holo Island, where we went out into the jungles and visited Army Special Forces who were co-located with Philippine Marines, helping them, supporting them, training them as they fought radical terrorists in the Pacific region. Day after day, the men and women that don the uniform of this United States Army, year after year for 236 years, have gone out and met that call. Every year of those 236 years has been special, but I would tell you, in my judgment, this year past has been particularly special. From the first time since the Vietnam War, we welcomed a living recipient to America's most honorable, venerable fellowship, those who have earned the Medal of Honor. And before long, we'll welcome another. Staff Sergeant Sal Junta and Sergeant First Class Leroy Arthur Petrie are not only symbols of the courage, valor, and selfless sacrifice of the men and women of the American military, they're a reflection of the values and sense of duty embodied in each and every American soldier. And I could not be more humbled or more proud to stand even remotely in their shadows. Today's a day of celebration, but as I mentioned earlier, for me it's a bittersweet occasion because we're beginning to mark Dr. Gates' last Army birthday as Secretary of Defense. And I have to tell you, the Secretary has served this nation both in and out of uniform. Now, some of you who were here last year may remember I tried to inscript him in the Army. He reminded us that he was going to stick with being a veteran of the Air Force. That's okay. That was great service. And he started young. And then for 27 years, he worked his way through the Central Intelligence Agency, rising to be its director. He served 8 different United States presidents, and since December 18th of 2006, he's been our 22nd Secretary of Defense. The United States Army, our soldiers, their families and civilians, has had no greater champion. Indeed, our military, all services have had no greater steward, and our nation no better public servant than the 22nd Secretary of Defense, Dr. Robert M. Gates. And ladies and gentlemen, on this, the 236th anniversary of the birth of this great Army, it's an honor for me to introduce to you the 22nd Secretary of Defense, the Honorable Dr. Robert M. Gates. Mr. Secretary.
Secretary McHugh, thank you very much for that kind introduction, and thanks to Secretary Shinseki, General Dempsey, Sergeant Major Chandler, civilian military officials, veterans, families, and all the distinguished guests here today. As an aside, General Dempsey, I'm sorry we're making you redecorate yet another office after just a few months, not to mention relinquishing the leadership of your beloved Army. But you have my deepest thanks for answering the call, and I know you'll be an exceptional chairman for all of our men and women who serve. I will say as an aside, among other things that I told the NATO defense ministers last week, was that I was beginning to feel like the tenor in a very long and bad opera. And in the last scene, a protracted death scene, and people keep waiting for me to just go down for the count, and I keep coming back up to sing one more aria. But thanks for the kind remarks, John. I'm delighted to be here celebrating the 236th birthday of the United States Army. One of the things I will miss most when I leave this post are occasions like this, where we have the opportunity to honor the remarkable soldiers, past and present, who have forged the most formidable Army the world has ever seen. And of course, I'll miss the cake too. Itself a pretty dramatic testimony to the Army's can-do spirit and logistical prowess. I know for many soldiers, coming to the Pentagon after an assignment downrange or with troop units can be quite a jarring, even bewildering experience. One of my personal heroes has always been Dwight Eisenhower, whose portrait hangs in my office next to George Marshall, two historic Army officers. But even Eisenhower was occasionally defeated by this building. Once, shortly after World War II, he made the mistake of trying to find his office by himself and got very lost. He later wrote, "One had to give the building his grudging admiration. It had apparently been designed to confuse any enemy who might infiltrate it." Eisenhower's example has been much on my mind lately. Last week, we marked the 67th anniversary of D-Day. Part of that day I spent with the 101st Airborne in Afghanistan. D-Day, one of Eisenhower's and the U.S. Army's greatest triumphs. One of the most deadly obstacles U.S. soldiers faced as they pressed inland from the beaches of France were hedgerows so thick and so tough that Allied tanks would ride not through, but right on top of them, losing traction and exposing their vulnerable underbellies to German fire. Then a cavalry sergeant had a brilliant idea of fashioning iron bars scavenged from German anti-landing craft fortifications into tank-mounted hedgerow cutters. Within 48 hours, 1st Army Ordnance had crafted nearly 300 of the cutters, and the rest of the story is Operation Cobra, the Army's successful advance through France. That victory was a demonstration of the great and abiding strengths of our Army, exceptional adaptability at all levels in the face of unpredictable circumstances, as well as the great trust and reliance placed in the ingenuity of soldiers of all ranks. The ground wars following 9/11 placed even heavier responsibilities on young leaders. From the earliest days in Iraq and Afghanistan, our soldiers downrange have been adjusting and improvising in response to the complex and evolving challenges on the ground, often using new technologies to share real-time tactical lessons with their comrades. At various stages, the mission has required our soldiers to be scholars, teachers, policemen, farmers, bankers, engineers, social workers, and of course, warriors, often all at the same time. And they have always risen to the challenge. It is this dynamism and flexibility that allowed us to pull Iraq back from the brink of chaos in 2007, and over the past year to roll back the Taliban from their strongholds in Afghanistan. I'd like to take a moment to thank the Army families that have so steadfastly stood by their soldiers and with one another throughout the fight. One of the most rewarding and important parts of my job has been the troop talks and town halls where I have the chance to hear honestly how things are going. No PowerPoints. This direct engagement with soldiers on the battlefield, their families at home, and civilians employed around the world has helped shape my views and the priorities of the service and the department. and I believe it is a critical responsibility of all leaders. The Army's challenge now is to learn the right lessons from the past decade. This doesn't mean assuming the next war will be similar to the last, a common and dangerous mistake, but rather making sure that diverse experiences and agility of today's young soldiers are institutionalized, so our Army stands at the ready for conflicts both foreseen and unforeseeable. This includes welcoming and embracing in peacetime the ingenuity, creativity, and innovative spirit of younger officers and NCOs so central to our success in combat. This is a challenge the Army has met countless times before in our history, and under the leadership of General Odierno, I have no doubt it will do so again. It has been the honor of my life to lead and to serve our men and women in uniform, and I will keep you and them in my prayers every day for the rest of my life. So here's to another 236 years. Happy birthday.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, the Chief of Staff of the Army will re-enlist soldiers from the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard, the National Guard, D.C. Army Air Operations Group, and the Baltimore Recruiting Battalion. The Chief of Staff of the Army will have the soldiers recite the oath of re-enlistment.
Okay, before I do, by show of hands, how many of you are married? Okay, if you told your spouse that you're going to re-enlist, put your hand down. Uh-oh. Some of you are going to have some explaining to do later tonight. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your full name. Do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed over me, according to regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So help me God. Congratulations. Let's give them a round of applause. Okay, go ahead and sit down. I'll be back with coins in a minute.
At this time, PFC Brendan D. Raley, the youngest soldier in the Military District of Washington, and Colonel Arthur Whittick, the oldest soldier in the Military District of Washington, will join the official party for the cake cutting. The Army birthday cake, commemorating 236 years of service to the nation, is being brought forward. It was prepared by the non-commissioned officers assigned to the Army Executive Dining Facility. Ladies and gentlemen, the Sergeant Major of the Army will now lead the Happy Birthday song.
Before I indulge you with my singing prowess, I would like to recognize two other individuals that are here with us today. They are our Army's best warriors. Sergeant McDougal, could you please stand up? Sergeant Gallagher, could you please stand up? This man and woman, these two soldiers, were recognized last year as our best warriors and are a shining example of the best of what our Army has to offer. Thank you very much. Round of applause. Okay, if you'll join in with me. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to the Army. Happy birthday.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Army birthday cake commemorating 236 years of service to the nation will now be cut by the official party. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand and join in the singing of the Army song along with the United States Army Band. The words to the Army song are printed on the back of your program.
First to fight for the right and to build the nation's might, and the Army goes rolling along. Proud of all we have done, fighting till the battle's won, and the Army goes rolling along. Then it's hi, hi, hey, the Army's on its way, out of the cadence loud and strong. For where'er we go, you will always know that the Army goes rolling along.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the cake cutting ceremony. You are invited to enjoy a piece of the Army birthday cake at the informal reception located to your left. We also encourage you to visit the displays here in the courtyard.